Hello and welcome. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are coming from. Obviously, I now am in Dallas, Texas. I'll be joined by Tony McCandles, who isn't. He will be in the UK. And I know we'll have audiences from both sides of the pond and Europe. So thank you for joining. Really pleased to be doing. I think it's my third webinar of the year, but really the first one on an up and coming trend that I've been monitoring over the last 12 to 18 months, which is around this world of process intelligence and a number of different technologies that fall under this bucket. So it's great to be able to talk today about this. To be joined by Tony, who's got a fantastic background in automation. He's an multiple times ex-CIO. So he really does know the business. And I really feel like it's a kindred spirit when discussing operational challenges and how they can be overcome by automation. So really pleased to be joined today. Let me just make sure that we can move. And hi, Tony. Pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. So for everyone's benefit, today we're going to talk a little bit, so introduction, and we'll do a quick intro of who we are for anybody that doesn't know myself or Tony. I'm going to take the analyst perspective on where we are with intelligent automation, what the intelligent automation landscape looks like at the moment, and then give a high-level overview of data-fueled discovery. And then Tony's going to take us on a journey from RPA into intelligent automation, including some hotspots to help those who are still on this journey figure out where next they may want to focus their efforts. And then I'm going to put Tony in the fireside chat chair and quiz him on his past experiences and where he sees the world moving forward from an intelligent automation perspective. And I would love you to provide him and me with some excellent questions. I have a number myself, but I know Tony knows what he's generally going to be asked by me. So I would love the audience to provide some additional questions so we can really test his vast knowledge in this space. So the harder, the gnarlier, the better. Of course, we do need to focus on intelligent automation, but let's really use this time and opportunity to get under the skin of Tony's past experiences. And of course, if there's anyone who would like to trip me up as well, of course, from an audience perspective, very happy to see what I can add into the mix. So hopefully we're going to try and wrap up at about 10 to make sure that everyone can get a coffee before their next meeting. So that is the plan. Of course, feel free to ask any questions. There are a number of polls that we will be going through today. Also, just a couple. My belief is that you can ask questions on the right-hand side of your screen, and our poll ability to input into the poll questions when they become available will be below the screen that you are watching right now. So hopefully all that works. Any queries or questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And my support team will be able to answer any of those. So without further ado, I think we've done a little bit of an intro, but let's do this a little bit more formally. So for anyone who is not aware, obviously it's your favorite British cowboy here, Wayne Butterfield. I was a very early adopter of robotic process automation all the way back in 2010. And I led a very successful deployment of Blue Prism within Telefonica. And that really laid the foundations for my love and passion of driving operational efficiency through the use of technology. And that spanned anything from contact centers to finance operations, from chatbots to RPA to machine learning to intelligent document processing. I love the use of technology to drive operations. And I spend a lot of my time thinking about where and what we need to do to continually improve operational efficiency through the use of technology. And I'm joined by Tony. Tony is CTO of EMEA for Blue Prism. Tony's got an incredibly interesting background, somebody who I have been aware of in the industry for a number of years. Tony, do you want to give us a bit more about yourself and enlighten the audience of your expertise?
Shall do. And just to build on what Wayne says, I join you today from Scotland. So just having recently come back from Europe, doing a bit of gnarly snowboarding, as you kind of referred to the word earlier, Wayne. Yeah, my background, it's interesting. It's almost like a game of soccer. Half of it was in supply with 10 fantastic years at Computer Center, UK and European services provider, and 7 years with Dell on a global basis, helping the team there take a view on services. And a bit like Wayne, my focus very much is always on how can you provide great services. Operational efficiency is great to have, but if you can build services around your people, treat the people properly, they will undoubtedly delight your customer. So, kind of one half of the career on that supply side, and then the other half, being very privileged to have some great CIO roles with one of the world's largest payments providers covering Europe, Middle East and Africa, and 3.5 years at Thames Water, which was fascinating. And I think one of the things I learned there, Wayne, was it doesn't really matter what industry you find yourself in. There is always so much to learn about what that industry does and how it operates. And everything has some degree of fascination. But at the heart of it all is an ability, as you've mentioned, for technology to really contribute towards what is an ultimate customer outcome. And that's the puzzle that we as professional technologists have got to solve and continue to solve as things evolve. So back to you, sir.
Fantastic. Great. Really good. And I think that really lays the foundations for today's discussion. The audience will be pleased. This is not going to be death by PowerPoint. And Tony and I are really going to talk from experience. So hopefully this is, generally in the main off the cuff and really insightful. So I mentioned before I would talk a little bit, and I'll take the analyst view for now. ISG is a leading research and advisory firm in that technology space, and a lot of the work that we do is from 50,000 foot, looking down at industries, at the latest trends. And I'm going to take that particular view today with intelligent automation. You may have seen this slide before if you've seen any of my webinars. This is affectionately referred to internally as Wayne's World. And what does that mean? Well, this is my interpretation, shall we say, of hyper-stroke intelligent automation. And you'll notice that there are a number of different technologies and capabilities within this ecosystem. And if I think about where I was a decade ago, more than a decade ago, it was very much in this kind of copy and paste world. And of course, there were organizations that had basic OCR, but actually the rest of these technologies and capabilities, maybe apart from management information, MI, were pretty much a twinkle in most people's eyes. But over the last decade, we figured out that if we're to drive operational efficiency, then we need to do more than just replicate copy and paste type transactions. And that's why this ecosystem has exploded. And RPA has been an incredibly successful capability that I would say has been one of the main reasons why we are seeing this no-code, low-code revolution. I don't think it gets enough credit for not just what it has done for automating process, but what it has enabled other technologies to reinvent themselves and to rethink about how they can receive wider spread adoption. So most of these technologies and capabilities now are standalone capabilities, but when you start to think about building all of these together, then that's when you really do start to be able to think seriously about automation transformation. Now, there's lots of technologies and capabilities. Today, we are going to specifically concentrate on that process discovery area. We have one huge unicorn in this space in Salonis, and I'm sure there will be many others to follow in due course. Obviously, there's a fantastic partnership that is blossoming between Abbey, Timeline, and Blue Prism, and we'll probably touch a little bit upon that today also. But let's not forget that there are other capabilities even within the process discovery space that I will talk a little bit about today, and they all have specific user cases. Again, not one size fits all. Is something that I've replicated to clients time and time again, that we really do want to be looking at square pegs and square holes, circle pegs and circle holes, not just trying to cram in a solution because everything looks like a nail because we have a hammer. So talk a little bit about that. What you may not have seen today is the intelligent automation periodic table. So this slide was going to build, but we're using PDF today. So unfortunately all of my key commentary is already showing. But if I was to look at the research, so again, we're a research and advisory firm at ISG. One of the things we do is constantly complete research in this particular market. And one of the things that we're seeing is that the average ISG automation client, and there are well over 250 of them, are using between 3 to 5 elements on this periodic page at the moment. And this is from a technology perspective, not just from a supporting functions perspective. And what does this all mean? Right. So if we start to think about the capabilities that technology is trying to replicate, and when we're trying to replicate the work that is done by our people, I like to break it down into capabilities. It's a human capability, it's a human characteristic, it's a process characteristic that we are trying to replicate. And today, we're really going to concentrate on this understand. Data fueled understanding. It's the very left column. And what's kind of in there? Well, we've got management information, we've got business intelligence, we've got task mining, process mining, and communications mining. This is really about us understanding process and understanding our business. Hence the title on this particular element is understand. As we start to think about maybe process or transact, as some of my colleagues like to refer to this one, we think about workflow. Okay, we think about business process management, think about low code application build. We're thinking then about CRM, and we're thinking about ERP. What you'll start to notice as we work through this is I've tried to go, hey, the kind of the simple one, maybe the one that's easiest to deploy is at the top of the periodic table. And as we start to really get into the levels of complexity, and maybe we're away from the low code, no code, and we're into actual development, software development, you'll start to see those at the very bottom. And again, we can start to go through this. We've got integrate. From an RPA perspective, very much see that as an ability to integrate between data and systems and systems. Look, anything in that kind of OCR, machine vision type space, intelligent document processing. Read and write, incredibly important as we start to replicate a lot of the work that we do. We are reading, we are interpreting, or we are writing. Converse. Again, this whole world of conversational AI, chatbots, etc., incredibly important as we start to think about how do we link different processes, different teams, different companies together to enable work to be completed, and then finally decide, how do we continue to make the right decisions? How do we automate decisions? So, you can see there's an entire spectrum of technologies here. They're all underpinned by supporting functions. And this is very much the way that we look at the world from an ISG perspective. So when we think about automation transformation, the thing that we're doing with our clients is figuring out what are the elements they need in order to help them transform. And it's horses for courses, where, different organizations, different teams, different industries will require different elements, even at a process by process level, in order to help them transform. So when I refer to ISG automation clients are currently using between 3 and 5 of these elements. Very true. By 2024, and I had to check myself yesterday because I still thought we were in 2021. So that's not a good start. But we are very much in 2022 right now. So within the next 2 years, that number is expected to exceed 10, the average number. And latest research is that 1 in 3 of our clients are citing automated process discovery as the kind of the top of the list for what's next. Now, for most organizations, it's probably within the top kind of 5. For 1 in 3 of our clients, it's the what's next. This is our next big bet, which is why today's webinar is very much focused on that particular topic. So I will go into data fuel discovery. And again, for anybody, feel free to throw the questions in. If there's any good ones, I may well just take them now versus just talking at you. So feel free to again to add these things in. So let me get into data fuel discovery. I really appreciate the term because I think it really resonates with a lot of our clients and has done for a while. That data fuel discovery is an enabler for a Fitbit for business. And what do we mean by that? Well, if you imagine being able to track your health through a small digital device, and mine's charging at the moment, but a small digital device on your wrist, you are able to see data at a level that really informs you of your performance, health, whatever you want to refer to it as. And it's there, it's constant. You can look back. In theory, you can start to predict forward, and it's instantaneous. One of the challenges I've always seen, and again, it's one of the things that we'll be quizzing Tony on later, is an organization is full of data, but how much of it is actually useful? And if I think about things such as budget planning, and I think about the game every year that we would play as we plan our budgets, it would be, this is what I need. Okay, well, we've got a 10%, 15%, 20% cut on that. That's just standard across everything. Okay. So this is what I need. This is what you're going to get. So what do I do? Well, I know there's going to be a cut. So I add in 20% more than what I need. So when I get a cut, I still get what I want. How is that any good? Like, what was that process? What was it built on? It was built on a game. It wasn't built on a reality. The budget cut percentage was built on a financial metric that we needed to meet. It wasn't built on the service that I needed to deliver. It wasn't necessarily built. It was built on, maybe our customer base is going to grow, so we will anticipate there's going to be some kind of percentage increase. It wasn't necessarily built on a reality. How long did each of those transactions take to the second? How many of them are we going to receive per minute, per hour, per day? It wasn't built on fact. It was built on a high-level spreadsheet and an assumption. So how do we turn an organization from presumption, from spreadsheet analysis into a data-fueled organization? And in my view, task mining and process mining are capabilities that not only should look back, but they should give you an ability to start predicting forward. And that's why this is a really, really interesting area for me. And it's why for organizations who are just looking at process and task mining as a capability to help them understand automation opportunities, you're missing a lot of the point. Actually, what you really want to be thinking about is how can we use these technologies, these monitoring technologies, to not just find automation opportunities, but to enable a Fitbit for business. So that's me on my high horse. As you can see, I'm really passionate about this because, as Tony will allude to himself, like, our background is in business. It is in operations. Yes, I use technology now, but I spent 15 years working in 2 of the largest telcos in the UK, deep in operations, so I know how they work. And I'm just so passionate knowing that how big business work, how this technology type can be truly transformational. And not just because there is an automation opportunity at the end of it, but actually this data can enable us to change the way that we do things like budgeting. It can change the way that we do resource planning. And that is what really gets me excited. It can fundamentally help transform the way of, some processes that have been the same for a long, long time. So where else are we going? So Paul one next. And then I think we're almost ready to hand over to Tony. So poll number 1. Now you can do this 2 ways, I believe, and this is my memory like a goldfish. I think you can go below, or you can use the QR code on screen. What is your biggest challenge when scaling automation in your business? And we've given you 4 options here: limited budget, trouble with finding opportunities, lack of executive sponsorship, and lack of talent. I think you can only choose one. I know from previous research that it differs by organization, so I don't necessarily expect a clean sweep of one of these to come out. But for you yourself in your organization, which one of these is the biggest challenge? And I am hoping. Oh, here we go. Well done, Hannah and Sarah, for that seamless move into the live polling. And as I say, I'm not necessarily surprised that we're seeing this type of movement. What did I say before we started?
Interesting.
So let's just give it another couple of minutes. The interesting one is that's lowest at the moment is the lack of talent. So if we think about lack of talent or lack of people, and I'll talk about this from just to fill the time, just while we wait for the final results to come through. We are about 30% of our resources short versus demand.
Yeah,
and we can't get the people right now. It's just a real hotbed of activity. And for anybody who has seen the report that EdTech release on an annual basis around the state of recruitment, predominantly focused in the UK and some of it in the US. And actually what it was saying is that one of the key takeaways that I took from that report was that we're so struggling to find people with good experience in this kind of automation landscape that we've now started to say, well, actually, if you're a good program manager, if you're good at managing programs, even though you don't have any experience within automation, you're probably going to be 70% a good fit. So we've now started to have to think a little bit more outside the box, because the vastness of the experience that the entire set of industries need is just not in the market. So we're having to diversify with the type of resource that we bring in. So it's interesting that the lack of talent is not the number one here. Tony, any kind of thoughts on that from you?
Yeah, it's an interesting one for a number of reasons. In fact, I spoke to a client a couple of weeks ago who are actually building the most incredible facility in the world. It's going to employ circa 15,000 people, and about 4,000 of them are what you would call really the management operating system, whereas 11,000 are in the yard, quite literally doing things. What they're talking about, Wayne, is building capability straight from graduate school, where they are going to build their own capabilities around data science and automation from point one, because you just cannot find enough people who have those capabilities and think that way, almost in a design thinking mindset. And it'll be fast. We're working with them in order to put the training, development, and certifications in place. But it is surprising. Maybe it's just that the 3 other things mentioned here are more pressing in the here and now. And as we begin to move into a new phase of living, with COVID, that there may be certain things that then start creeping up the importance ratings as we go.
Excellent. I love that concept. In fact, it's certainly not today's topic, but one of the things that I'm really focused in at the moment is the challenges that have been put forth around citizen developer. And again, it's that mindset issue and challenge that for most people who have been in industry doing a process, working in a department for so long in a very manual way, that ability to suddenly change overnight to say, right, how can I do my work in a more automated fashion
Yeah.
is a real challenge. And how do you overcome that? Well, that is a brilliant example of let's bring people in with that mindset on day one, because that is their norm, not Wayne from finance who's done the same process for 20 years and I still print off my invoices and highlight the areas that I'm going to insert manually into SAP. Try and change me. No, that's not going to happen. But bring somebody in right on day one with that mindset sounds like a fantastic way of overcoming that challenge, not just from a lack of talent perspective, but a mindset, which is fantastic. Now, Tony, I can hear the dog, who obviously agrees massively with that comment of mine.
Yeah,
so good to get some verbal approval. Right. Back to the slides. And I just realized, Tony, I'm pressing next. So if you can give me the verbal cue on some of this.
Yeah, just head into this one. So yeah, I think when, as you said earlier, you look back on kind of the history of automation, very much started with that. How can you mimic what the human being is doing? So record the keystrokes, do this, do that, and huge value added in that RPA phase. But I think it's what's now emerged is that all the pieces that you talked about before in terms of the periodic table, which, as you say, gets more complex as you go down it, but also gets less comfortable for human beings as you head to the right, because we get to that point where automation is beginning to make decisions, which human beings tend to be a little bit concerned about. And so when we look at this, how have we gone from RPA to actually having that capability today for this to happen? And it very much is around bringing other capabilities into play against RPA and saying, well, if this could read documents the same way a human being does, if it could process language the same way a human being does and pick up sentiment, what do we get there? We get a more accurate input as to what it is being requested and how it's being requested, and therefore our response to it can improve massively. And you talked about data, and I spoke to someone this morning who gave me a great example. There is no lack of information and data points out there, but how do you bring them into play in such a way that there is an outcome that data has been analyzed and gives you insight to then say, how do we enhance the ability to deliver that outcome? And the example given this morning was about care services for young people. And there is a local authority in the UK that have really looked at this challenge and being able to go across multiple agencies in order to bring that data in and deliver insight to make sure that they can identify when a young person may be in some state of risk. And before, it was almost impossible to do that. And you think about that, and the conclusion we came to this morning when discussing this was that if that saves one child's life, because the systems that are there are focused on an outcome, what a fantastic undertaking that is for technology to be able to enable. And then, I think when we get to the machine learning aspect of it, both at a technical level, so as an ex-CIO, a lot of technical things were on my plate and, subsequently my team's. And what we found is that by allowing machine learning to go out there and just constantly analyze what was happening in our systems, we were able to cut downtime for our business dramatically. 90% plus, because we allowed the system to learn what normal was and alert us when we got out of that norm. And not always at the point that something had failed, but pointing to potential failure earlier in the day. And when we add automation on top of that, you can then put reactive responses in. So yeah, you think of going from the days of RPA, kind of tracking the keystrokes and the mouse clicks, and now we've got, quite literally today, and to your point as well, it's not one size fits all. There are many aspects to the solutions in the marketplace, but just to be able to do this today, I think is fantastic. So if we want to go on to our next. So when we look at this stuff, though, where is it occurring by industry? And you talked, the periodic table's got 27 items on it. People are using 3 to 5. They may end up using 10. But when you also look at how does technology move through society and through industries, industry sectors, and analysis shows that it moves through by people within these sectors talking to each other. So rather than, a vendor of technology like Blue Prism or others going and doing big conferences, what you will find actually is that banking and financial services people talking to each other are very much more likely to carry a message about, well, we are using X, Y, or Z to achieve this. And that is the way in which things pass from one to the other. And when we also see a need driven, as we have done in the last 2 years, and a matter of some pride for Blue Prism is the way in which the organisation lent into the crisis in health brought upon by the pandemic. And last week I presented at the Scottish Digital Healthcare Forum, and it really was us thanking them. And we had done our little bit there. And the thing that really resonates, Wayne, was that what we were doing was using technology to give nurses and doctors time back to use the skills that they have to care for human beings. And we've got so many statistics around it, but that's an important message, is giving time back to people with skills, making the system serve them and not them serving systems. And we can call that operational efficiency, it can cut cost, etc., but really it's letting people do what they're best at doing, which is serving and helping other people. And whether or not that's in banking and finance, where certainly if you think in the last 2 years, we talk about loan processing, but the reality is that many organizations, many people working within them, needed to get quick access to things like furlough cash and government loans to keep their businesses alive and well. And the only way in which some organizations could do that was to bring in far more intelligent automation solutions. They could never employ enough people to answer phones to then process these things in time. And again, go back to what that means. That means that someone is able to be paid. They can go home, pay for food, pay for heating, etc. So yeah, across industries, we see different uptake. We see high numbers, banking, finance, insurance, etc. But I think, like my perspective would say that there is a world of opportunity out there to bring automation into play, and with the key aim being free the people up who are currently serving systems, let the system serve them, free these people up to deliver the services to your customers, and you get into that positive loop whereby happier employees, happier customers. Okay. And yeah, just talking about some returns. And look, we do talk here about some numbers, and it's not, to be impressive about big numbers, but this is real. This is real here and now. And we didn't put the Telefonica one in here just for you, Wayne, but I know you could talk passionately about that. But we see, in telecoms really taking a strategic approach, in actual fact, saying, well, how do we design work? Why is today's work so person intense doing things that in actual fact maybe a person doesn't need to do. So, a strategic design driven work design perspective, we've got other areas where we look and say, we need to use automation, we're preventing identity theft, etc., but a reduction in cost, but also uplifting customer experience. If there's anything in the last 2 years that we've seen, it is the fact that people want to talk to people and have time with them. If you are going to make that happen with things like contact centers, or I prefer to call them now customer experience centers, those people need to have the time. Therefore, take the tasks away from them that are preventing them talking and listening to a customer. And we see, Aviva's incredible achievements here. They've managed to get 3.8 million transactions processed and brought digital workers into play there. So, fantastic. And then National Grid, efficiency that you've talked about there earlier. So again, 4 exemplars here. There are many, many more. But yes, we can talk about this in terms of customer experience, employee experience, but also revenue and cost and operational efficiency. And they are the real returns. And then when we kind of think about this, and I think you touched on something earlier, and again, if people think back to your periodic table, complexity, more complex towards the bottom, but also more challenging for human beings to adapt to as you move left to right. So I don't know, Wayne, if you've ever read books by Malcolm Gladwell, but he's got one, Talking to Strangers. And at the end of it, he actually does talk about intelligent automation and decision-making within law. And it's been shown that if you were to put decision-making about criminal cases in the hands of systems that are well built and driven by automation, the decisions that you're likely to get are much, much better than you would with a human judge and jury system. Now, that is chilling to everyone. Nobody kind of wants that, but it's a statistical reality. And why? Because you spoke earlier about inbuilt bias. And as long as you build the systems properly and check for that bias and make sure it isn't built in, you can actually get a lot done. Now, nobody's proposing that everything gets done and we move to that doomsday scenario that sometimes you see put out in the press. Automation is going to steal everyone's jobs. It's going to impoverish us. That is not the case. Today, not just in the UK, but I think across the world, we do see challenges in having enough people to deliver the outcomes that organizations need to deliver. In the UK alone, there are 1.4 million job vacancies right now that are not being filled. And they're across all sorts of industries. So how can we say, right, okay, organizations have work to achieve, they've got customer outcomes they need to get to. If we think about intelligent automation as a tool to do that, because we can't get enough people, and we should have the people doing the things that they're best at, not serving systems, we can see moving towards a position where you might have a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split, where systems do things, human workers do things, but the digital workers are also working in there. And then we talk about a new business operating system and a new way of thinking about designing work and having automation lean into that to make it happen. And again, I go back to make the employee's job as easy as possible, make it as pleasurable as possible, and they will look after your customers, and you'll probably be able to get more work done without, suffering shortages in your workforce.
Excellent. And I think now we are on to our second and final poll. And again, this one's a little bit more focused on process intelligence. So for, again, exactly the same process as last time, everybody, QR code on the right, or the ability to interact below. So at what stage are you on your process intelligence journey? So haven't started yet, completed a POC or pilot, implemented it now, or have been using it for years. Okay, so again, not necessarily a surprise that many are still in the kind of earlier stages of this.
Mm-hmm.
I know certainly just about every conversation I have with a client right now, this is the one area of that periodic table or the slide before that they're really starting to focus in on as they see the value. But again, it's not necessarily a new technology, a new capability. There are organizations that have been around for quite a while, but I think the usage of this, the reason to want to use it has changed, and that's always interesting. It's an interesting thought process.
Yeah, I'd agree. When I think when we look at it, it is interesting, isn't it? You haven't started yet and completed, a proof of concept or pilot, massively ahead together. And for me personally, I know we'll have a bit of a Q&A bit in the chair sort of thing, but this was always the missing piece. It was, great to use intelligent automation, and everyone runs and starts that pilot, and you co-create with the business. Everyone's feeling great, high fives, and then you're like, what are we going to do next then? And they're like, oh, we'll just repeat that process all the way through the business. And the business looks at you in horror, going, how many of my people do you want? For how long? Do you not know I actually have a job to do during the day and a business to run? And that for me is what, just with regards to intelligent automation, is why so many organizations end up doing a pilot. They've got 3 to 5 digital workers, but they never go any further, because to get the art of the possible within their organization without using process intelligence, I think you're just taking up too much business time.
Excellent. Yeah, you're absolutely right there. And again, thinking back, one of the questions that I was planning on asking was, what difference would this have made to you had this capability being available? Because you're right, it's very difficult not to be drawn in by the shiny new toy that we have, and intelligent automation. And I spent years really thinking about, okay, do we really assess, and do we need to do a deep lean assessment of a given process or area prior to automating, or do we just automate, as is? And that was a debate that went on for such a long time, and there was always kind of pros and cons on both of those. And the pushback on the deep dive was always, well, it could take us 6 months, and we'll be really filled with data, but we don't really have data to start. So maybe if we automate now, then automation will give us data, then we can improve the process. And I guess in some instances that works quite well, but as we've seen with organizations that are trying to scale, that's probably not the thing that we in reality are seeing.
Yeah, I think, to that point as well, I've got one example where the organization had well over 4,000 distinct processes. And there's a whole load of things in technology that I call unicorn projects. It's things like the perfect CMDB, the perfect enterprise data warehouse or data lake or whatever today's terminology is going to be for the next data thing. And along with that comes let's examine all of the business's processes. We'll capture them, we'll redo them. And if you come back in 2 years, it'll be a perfect world. And we had over 4,000 processes, and the consultants engaged were like, well, we think, 25% of them are fine. So look of horror. And 2 months into it, they're like, well, no, none of them are fine. So we're going to start it all again. And all you can hear are, the pounds burning away as you're about to head on to this thing that you can't see where it's going to release true value for the business. So yeah, sometimes I think, somewhere in the middle of those extremes lies the truth.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. We have a number of questions from the audience as well, so I won't just hog the entire limelight on my list. So the first one here actually is, how can technology simplify the understanding of data stroke processes? by the C-suite and D-suite with all the automation and dashboards. So do you have any view on that?
Yeah, I think really good question. If you think back a couple of years when you will have seen the same thing I did, that there was a point where almost every board had to talk to what was it doing about automation, and a whole load of pilots kicked off where people no idea at all about what they were doing. The C-suite kind of didn't really know, they just heard about this stuff. I think now that what we see in this question is really what we need to do with the C and D suites, etc., is say, right, if you think what we exist to do as an organization, there are customer outcomes, the way in which processes and all of the technology that looks to automate and make them easier and more efficient and help your employees deliver, that is what this is here to do. So, using illustrative examples for your industry about here is how a customer might apply for a mortgage. Here's how, a patient makes an appointment and their data is brought in and followed through. Here is how a student engages with a university, how the processes and systems support during it and after, and put the technology in business mindset and business driven things that the C-suite recognize the organization does. If you can put across, right, behind that are processes to achieve these outcomes, and here are opportunities, then I think that's where you begin to bridge that gap between technologists and businesses and business leadership.
Excellent. Okay, we've got another question here from the audience. If you had your time again as a CIO or moving back into a CIO role, what would you do differently now that we have these newer technologies available to ourselves?
I think like one of the big things, and it wasn't me that came up with it, it was an ex-colleague of mine who showed me just about how, as a technologist and technology leader, contextualize by getting closer to the business. Got quite literally go out in vans if you're in utilities, do something like that. And it really would be to link into understand that business and then start thinking about, okay, how does technology enable the business to serve the customer? Try and get your mind in that. And one of the first examples of that was when we were building a new technology management capability in one business. We decided to use what we call business service lines in order to drive how technology was organized and executed and the systems delivered to deliver business outcomes. And for too long, I think in my career, a lot of it has been, look, here's a task, get it done, get the technology angle, worry about what the business does with it later. I think really it is a case of work out what digital and technology can do for your business and talk about it that way. Because if you can engage with other people in the C-suite or level down from there and listen to them first, for God's sake, seek first to understand before being understood, bringing our solutions to the table, going, where's your problem? Understand what's going on for the business.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's really really insightful. Last question, because I'm conscious of time, and we do try and wrap up a little early for those coffee breaks. Okay, so how has intelligence, and probably more to the CIO role, how has this changed the role itself? Like, has this no code, low code, intelligent automation, process discovery, like revolution, changed the role of the CIO in your kind of view?
So I'm not sure it has yet. I'll be honest. I think, in March 2020, for the first time in our entire lives, technologists were heroes. We mobilized organizations, we did all of this. I think we won a little bit of respect there, but now it's a case of, right, okay, having built on that, how can you really integrate with the business to become not a cost in the business as it's often viewed, and therefore, as you said earlier, that annualized, well, you've got a 10% challenge, you've got a 10% challenge, 3-4 years in, it's exhausting, there isn't anywhere left. I think really for the CIO, CDIO, CTO, whoever is that technology leader, having the ability to maybe even say, you know what, the intelligent automation is what comes after you have done the process intelligence work, and you need to work out how can you get that done with the right level of business input, but without sucking up all of the business's time. Maybe first time through, you do that in order to work with the business and capture and show them what it takes. But if you've got process intelligence running in the background, and you can go to the table and say, look, here's a starter for 10. Here's the art of the possible that we've been able to get out of just examining the systems and doing some task mining. I think the value that you add far earlier in the process will gain more respect, integrates technology and the business far better than if technology is sitting in a room behind and comes out like a magician going, here's the magic thing we created, really doing it together. So I think it can change the role, Wayne, but I think technology leaders need to think of it that way. And also I'd say that from the business side, the business needs to want to partner with technology, and it's not a throwaway phase. It really wants to, rather than just throwing demands at technology. So where this works best, I think you've got both technology and the business.
Excellent. Oh, cool. And unfortunately, what's happening now is your insightful answers are generating lots of discussion and further questions. So I am going to have to squeeze one of the 6 in that we have. Right. I apologize to anybody that we don't necessarily get round to now, but one of the things that I will do is I will post on LinkedIn access to the replay and things like that. And I will gain Tony's insight on these remaining questions and get him to answer. And I'll put those in the comments. So we will get round to them, just maybe not today. Let me try and think about what maybe the quickest one would be. And this is a good debate, actually. It'd be good to get your view on. Should the automation COE sit under technology or ops?
I knew that was coming. I knew. Ex-CIO, okay? So it's like, give it to me.
Yeah.
I can't, is technology part of ops? Yeah. You can slice and dice your organization any which way you want. I think the thing about it that's really important is not necessarily who's got that or pulling the strings on it, but how is it brought together? What is an automation COE? Where's the technology represented, but where's the business represented within that COE? Because if you get the construct right at that level, then it's people working together across the piece. So, I will give, though, a slight cautionary note. Democratization of intelligent automation and all of this low code is great. You need governance, though, somewhere. And that isn't to say nothing happens unless some high-up person signs it off. But I do have an example where things had been developed using a certain technology. The very large company that owned it changed something in the background. And this thing that had been developed was actually part and parcel of the operational day in, day out management of a critical facility that was regulated. When this broke, it took 3 months to fix, and therefore the ability to report back on a regulated basis had gone. So that's why I think you need some standards, some governance that says, yes, put it in the hands of whoever needs to do it, but you need to develop to a standard, go through testing, resilience, and also know if anything changes in the background, how does that capability keep on functioning? Because when it doesn't, it's horrible and it's painful.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So great. Great that you were able to review that. I think that's great to get that insight. We are now going to be up for time. We have 5 minutes. People can still grab a coffee before their next meeting. Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure. As I say, we have so many other questions that have come through that I didn't even get to ask half of mine. But I think that always shows the signs of a good discussion when we really are opening the floodgates on trying to gain extra insight from your years of wisdom. So thank you, the audience, for your participation. Of course, as I mentioned before, this will be available on replay. We will ensure that we get round to answering any of these additional questions, and I'll make sure that they're added into show notes and the comments, etc. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
And thanks for the opportunity, Wayne. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.